Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. Welcome to our third Speak Out Reach Out event for the year, sponsored by Active Minds. Tonight we have Megan Harrison speaking. She's a senior at Carthage. She's going to be talking about embracing adjustment and changing your perspective. So I'll give her a nice warm welcome.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. I really appreciate you all coming here to support me while I share my story. All right, my story. For a while, it was hard for me to come up with a way to say my story. Did I really even have one? It seems like everyone else who signed up for Speak Out, Reach Out has suffered a true mental illness or a long-term struggle. But then I remembered why I joined Active Minds in the first place and how I came up with the idea for Speak Out, Reach Out. If I say SORO, I apologize, but I'm just so used to saying that. These speeches aren't just about a chance for the speaker to share their experience, but for those in the audience to realize that they are not alone. If someone had told me my freshman year that I was not the only one who had trouble adjusting to college, that I was not the only one who felt more alone at a bigger school than ever, that I was not the only one who wanted to go home on the weekends just to feel more like myself, it would have made all the difference. So that's why I finally decided that it's time to share my story. Fresh out of high school, I was excited for college, but probably not as excited as everyone else. I loved high school. I loved everything about high school, the friends, the teachers, the classes, the extracurriculars. It was an amazing 4 years for me. I would never have described myself as popular for no other reason than that term carries a stigma of its own. But I had plenty of friends. I pretty much got along with everyone. I was a straight-A student almost every semester, almost because of a few B's in gym class. And I was involved in more organizations than I probably should have been. There was nothing in my high school experience that ever made me say, I can't wait to get out of here. Now, it helps that I have a fairly good home life. Not perfect. My parents divorced when I was 10, and my dad remarried, and I struggled with that growing up, but pretty good. I have maintained a great relationship with my mom. So there was never any time where I felt like I had to get out of the house either. I was excited about college because it was a new adventure and I'd be taking classes that would prepare me for what I wanted to do. But I didn't start counting down the days until like a few weeks before, unlike most of my friends who had their countdown set at the beginning of senior year. The first week of school was pretty good. I hit it off with my roommate from the very first night, which was an incredible relief since I had spent the majority of the summer worrying that she was going to be a kleptomaniac or a Colombian drug lord. And honestly, I owe the majority of my staying at Carthage to her because despite what happened freshman year, I never felt uncomfortable in my room, which from the horror stories of my friends I've heard is pretty lucky. Classes were another story. I loved Heritage. Yes, I am one of those kids. I am not ashamed. I liked my education class. Astronomy was significantly harder than I expected. A lot more mathematical equations than learning about planets, but it was all right. I just spent every Thursday night in the study sessions, but, got through it. But then there was French. I took French for 4 years of high school and was placed in French 202 at Carthage. I'd done well with all my assignments in high school, but my ability to speak was pretty poor, probably due to the fact that my classmates and I spent the majority of our senior year eating cheese and drinking French lemonade. But I don't want to bore you with those details, but I think that my struggles with French definitely began my trouble with school. I loved my teacher, and I felt like I was learning a lot, but it was really hard to do so. Just so we're clear, I'm the type of student who actually reads and does all the assignments, so crazy concept, I know, but it gets me A's, and that's what I want. We had a murder mystery to read for French, and it was probably like 5th grade level for French-speaking individuals, but and I really wanted to get through it without using an online translator, but it probably took me about an hour per chapter. And I got through it, and that was fine. But the day one of my classmates bragged that she had read French translations of Shakespeare, and this is just easy kid stuff, didn't make me feel too great about myself. Hearing from my French teacher, who's from France, and probably didn't mean it the way it sounds, I pity you, did not help my self-esteem either. For the first month or so, I was pretty okay, except for the days that I had to go to French. It started to seem like every day I walked back from class, I just felt sad. I gradually became more and more reserved in my classes. The only class I spoke in was Heritage, which was only because nobody else wanted to talk in the class, and the teacher led pretty interesting discussion. And I'm a literature nerd, I can't help it. But classes weren't the only thing stressing me out. The first week of school, I had signed up for band auditions, thinking I had to do so to join the pep band, which I had done in high school. I ended up getting into concert band as a percussionist, and though it wasn't my original plan, I was pretty excited. That wasn't until I got to the practices. The first couple weeks, we had practice every day to prepare for a concert in September, and I felt very overwhelmed by the time commitment with all the homework I had. But the fact that I didn't get along with anyone in band was the hardest part. One of the other percussionists in particular was pretty rude to me throughout the year. Now, in my small high school band, our percussionists each kind of played one thing. Like, I played the bells and the xylophone, one person played the timpani, one the set, like, you get the idea. I learned the bells in high school, and it was the only percussion experience I ever had. So when I got to concert band, I had some trouble adjusting to the other instruments. Now, you may think that the triangle is easy to play, but you think I'm kidding. But let me tell you, there is a very specific way to hit it. So my flicking the triangle was not at the right angle, my crashing the cymbals was offbeat, and my bass drum was pretty timid. But I tried to get used to it. This other percussionist, who I didn't get along with so well, constantly bragged about how her band was so much better in high school, blah, blah, blah. One day this person asked me if I could cover the snare drum, which, unlike the bass drum or triangle, which are difficult, you can't pick up just in one day. And I said, I don't know how to play that, because all I ever did was mallets. And she looked at me and said, then what are you doing in a college band? I really did not want that to sting, but it did. The band director knew my background, and I knew my background, but when I was already feeling pretty low about my fitting in, that question hurt pretty bad. It was after that comment that I began to hate band. Suddenly it seemed like no one was there to have fun. Everyone was so serious. I stuck it out the year because I'm not a quitter, and I didn't want this person to know that they got to me. But there were several days where I would leave band early, or I would just go back to my room and cry because this was so not what I wanted. It was nothing like band in high school, where everyone knew each other's names. Nobody was nasty to each other. Band wasn't a competition. It was something you did because you enjoyed it. Now, I don't mean to offend our school's band because all the bands are excellent, and I'm sure that most of the members enjoy being there, but unfortunately, a couple of rotten eggs made it a miserable experience for me. I started comparing how things were different from high school. Band, obviously, but the hardest part was my lack of friends. I had a couple people I got along with, and my roommate and I were pretty close, but it was nothing like high school. In high school, I was the outgoing one, and I never hurt for friends. I realized that I never hung out with anyone besides my roommate at school, and even she began to make friends in track, so our time together diminished. There were people I got along with, but no one ever wanted to do anything with me outside of class. I tried joining a sport club, which I had done in high school, but in my high school it was very competitive, and I'd done very well in my last season. Here it was only a club, and I had a hard time bringing my competitiveness out of it. They also did things a lot differently than I did, so there was always this constant tension between them and me, so I didn't belong there either. During my first semester, I probably only stayed at school a handful of weekends. I did have a job back at home that I tried to pick up hours now and then, but honestly, the only reason I would stay at Carthage on the weekends was if there was a game to play for pep band. And even on those weekends, I was miserable after the game was over. I wanted to be home more than anything. I wanted so badly to feel good again and feel more like myself, but the only way I felt I could do that was to go home or to talk to people from home. My mom and my boyfriend would come up for my, as I call them, pep band games, because without the band, it's just a game, right? And although I loved seeing them, I felt horrible after they would leave. I began to associate the only times that I felt happy to them, and it became increasingly difficult to deal with the separation. I called my mom a lot during the school week, and after I would get off the phone, I would usually just break down. Most of the time, I just couldn't understand why I felt the way I did. Why couldn't I just not let things like stressful classes or mean people bother me? I wanted to talk to my mom and have her remind me that I could handle this and that things would be better. And usually she did tell me those things. But after I got off the phone, I started to believe that I couldn't handle it. I tried talking to my boyfriend, Sam, on Instant Messenger. Yes, I still use AIM, don't judge me. Since he had always been a source of stability and support throughout high school. Sam attended a school back home for the first 2 years of college, and while the distance per se didn't strain our relationship, the situation did. He wanted to be away at school more than anything and was working hard to get there, but I wanted to be at home more than anything. I actually even considered transferring to our community college instead for my first 2 years, but I knew it would put me behind in my plan. And while we tried to be understanding of what the other was going through, we didn't understand, plain and simple, and that was really hard. I knew he was having a difficult time and I wanted to be there for him, but I couldn't even be there for myself. So instead, I would get mad or I would avoid talking to him because I was afraid it would just make things worse. I think the hardest time was winter break. I saw a lot of my friends who I am still fortunately very close to. All of these friends, every single one of them loved college. They had friends, they had fun, they had the time of their lives. It only made it worse for me. What happened to me? Why couldn't I have the experience they had? A friend of mine once said to me, who wouldn't want to be Megan Harrison? After my first semester of college, I didn't want to be. I forgot what that even meant anymore. The person I thought I was had vanished. I wasn't outgoing, I was quiet. I didn't have tons of friends, I had like 3. I wasn't involved in umpteen activities, I had 2. Worst of all, I didn't wake up every morning loving who I was anymore. Winter was the loneliest. My roommate was gone a lot because she was in track, and I was stuck in my room with homework. My roommate also started going to dinner with her teammates, and I started getting jealous, not because she wasn't going with me, but because she had a group of friends and I didn't. I felt sorry for myself every time I ate alone in the cafeteria. My insecurity had gotten me so bad that I felt like everyone who knew me and saw me there pitied me, like they thought I couldn't get friends. I avoided the cafeteria when I didn't have someone to eat with because I didn't want to be seen alone. I was ashamed. I either ate in my room or I went with my roommate and her teammates, but one of her teammates was not so welcoming to me, so that was almost worse. I think the hardest part was the letdown. You know, the letdown feeling? Like when you've been waiting for something for such a long time and when it's over, the adrenaline is gone and you feel empty and disappointed for no reason. That's how I felt almost every day of my freshman year. I thought college would be just like high school. It'd be the second time of my life, but it wasn't. I thought I would have friends, but I didn't. It was so hard for me to stay focused and keep a brave face every day. My state of mind was weakening, and it was hard for me to keep it together. My mom told me I couldn't be depressed because I continued to get straight A's, so I was still functioning normally. But the A's were the only thing that I could do. My academic life was all I had, and I had plenty of time to focus on it. And I knew I wasn't depressed because I wasn't sad for no reason. I had a reason. I felt so lonely. I felt like the world was moving on around me, but I was stuck. I started thinking thoughts like, I would have been better off dying before college because at least I would have felt I'd lived a good life. It sounds stupid to me now, but it was so hard to see that an end was in sight. Several nights I took Benadryl to fall asleep faster because I wouldn't have enough time to lie awake and feel sorry for myself and cry. Sometime in March, I was assigned to take photos for The Current, our awesome newspaper here, of a speaker hosted by some group called Active Minds, which I thought might be a group that got together to do logic problems or puzzles. Still thought that for quite a while. I had no idea what the speaker was even about, and I didn't really want to go, but I figured I could go get a few snapshots and leave after 5 minutes. The speaker was Allison Malman, the founder of the original Active Minds, who came to share her story about the suicide of her brother. While I had not expected to be there long, I ended up staying for the entire presentation. She talked about the signs that her brother was not doing well and how suicide can be prevented if steps are taken earlier. Sorry, I talk so much, I need water. The thing that made me decide to do something about my situation was when she said, there's no line between crazy and not crazy. We may not all have mental illness, but we all have mental health. If you're feeling low, don't think, I'm not crazy or bad enough to go to a counselor. Talk to someone immediately. I knew we had a counselor on campus. I, like probably lots of people in this room, had seen the information flyers for the Health Counseling Center in the bathroom. Sometime in November, I had drafted an email to Deborah. My name is Megan. I'm a freshman here. I was wondering how I set up a counseling appointment. I'm really having trouble adjusting to college. I'm not making friends. With the exception of a few times, I often feel unhappy and alone. It's not that big of a deal. As soon as spring semester comes, I'll be able to keep myself busy at least, so I won't need friends. Although I felt unhappy this past semester even when I was busy. I just don't know how to make myself enjoy this more. I feel like I abandoned my life in high school. I had friends, I was involved in other things. I love being at school. Here I just sit in nostalgia. I read a flyer that said the counseling center helped with transitions like adjusting to college. So I was wondering if you think you'd be able to help me. I don't want to be told how to make friends. I just want someone to help me find ways to cope with the fact that I don't fit in so I can more easily focus on my schoolwork. Sounds pretty pathetic, right? I fortunately left that message in my drafts because at the time I thought it was pretty pointless. But for some reason, Allison's presentation really got to me. I knew that I wanted to get better, and I wanted to be me again. I needed to talk to someone before it became a bigger issue. Just before I left the room, I went to the table, that one, where the Active Minds Club had left a pad for people to add emails if they were interested in becoming a member, and I signed myself up. As soon as I got back to the room, I emailed Deborah a much more condensed email to set up a counseling appointment. When I met with Deborah, I wasn't sure what to say, despite the lovely ramble that I had prepared in that first draft. I remember starting off by mentioning that I had been to counselors before when my parents got divorced and in years following, but I got defensive before she even said anything and said, "But that's not what this is about. I'm totally past that, and I don't want that to be a factor." She just smiled and said, "That's okay, we don't have to talk about that." So I told her everything, and we set up another appointment for the next week. I didn't tell anyone I was going to the counselor, not that I had that many people to tell, but I still felt confused about why I was going. I got an email about an Active Minds meeting that week, and I decided to go. There were only about 4 or 5 people in the group that time, so it was very obvious when I walked into the meeting late, but they were extremely welcoming. They were planning some movie event, and I didn't say much even though I had ideas. The president at the time actually asked me if I had any suggestions, and when I gave them, she wrote them down. It seems silly now, but it was the first time in a long time where I felt valued. I kept attending the meetings and got heavily involved freakishly fast. They wanted to do a Relay for Life team, but all the members were already on other teams. I barely even knew what Relay for Life was at the time, but I offered to head the team. I made the team, I got members, most of whom were not in Active Minds, and we even made shirts and raised money. I started feeling good again because I was doing something. After a few counseling sessions and activities with Active Minds, I noticed my mood improving, and I thought, aha, things will be much better now. But there was this one thing about spring semester I forgot to mention. I took my first English class. Now, English is my major, so you wouldn't think that would be of concern. But let's just say there were a few students in my class who made me feel very insecure about my choice to be an English major. One student threw out literary terms I hadn't even heard of. Several connected ideas to books I hadn't read. And I sat there feeling like any idea I had was not adequate enough to voice. My professor had us write these 1 to 2 page close readings where you examine one passage and offer interpretations of the whole. My professor was a tough grader, and although I often got B's on her papers, which many said was good in her class, I felt down. Writing papers had usually come pretty easy to me, but now I was among other students who that was probably the case for as well. Expectations were higher, and I constantly worried about not living up to them. I spent hours revising these 1 to 2 page close readings because I was determined to get an A. That was the only way I could prove to myself and to everyone else that I belonged among the English majors. Before Easter weekend, I worked on my close reading early so I would not have any homework on the weekend and I could just spend some well-needed time with Mom. During the class before break, a student asked some questions, and after the professor explained what she wanted, I realized I had done it entirely wrong. Something inside of me just snapped. I just want to go home and have a few worry-free days, and here I would have to redo the entire assignment. I broke down, right in class. I tried really hard to mask the fact that I was crying by covering my face and pretending to take notes, but I felt humiliated. But what could I do? My anxiety was through the roof, and I could not get a hold of myself. After class, my professor asked me what was wrong, and although I could hold it together silently, when I tried to speak, I just sobbed. She took me to her office, and I explained what was going through my head. The reason I broke down in class, why I didn't participate in class, the way I felt so below the level of my classmates, the thought that I don't belong in any venue at Carthage. She reassured me several times that she thought I was a good writer and had a lot of valuable ideas. Then she said something to me that to this day I have not forgotten. It would be a shame if you left the English department. That conversation with my professor was probably one of the most beneficial things that happened to me that semester. She then understood what I was going through, and I felt slightly less insecure in class. Sure, some of the other students still got to me, still do from time to time, but the fact that the head of the department did not want me to leave it had a huge impact on my self-esteem. I kept up with Active Minds, I kept working hard in my classes, and I finished the semester with more straight A's. When Active Minds hosted elections, I ran for vice president and got it. I was unopposed, but it's still something. The summer between my freshman and sophomore year involved a lot of reflecting. I avoided many of my high school friends for quite some time because they had no interest in hearing their stories of how wonderful college was. But in time, I was able to open up to them. I went back to school with low expectations because then I can't be disappointed. And in a way, that worked. I made a show board for Active Minds at the org fair. The president, Terry then, and I got a lot more students involved. I planned activities, I scheduled meetings, I sent emails, and it felt good to be part of something. My classes sophomore year weren't much easier in an academic sense, but they were easier in an emotional sense because I stopped giving a crap what my fellow classmates thought of me. I got A's, I learned great things, and I knew that my hard work would pay off one day. My involvement in Active Minds is partially what saved me. I'm not trying to tell you that joining our group will solve all your problems, or will it? But I am saying that co-curricular involvement is an essential part of this experience. Having been someone who always found ways of self-coping until college, I never really thought much of mental health. But this group showed me that lots of people my age, people in my classes, feel the way I do, or worse. And I became passionate about finding ways to break the silence and help those I could. I was interviewed for the paper in the fall of my sophomore year, and the reporter asked, "So what have you guys done to actively break the stigma?" And unfortunately, I wasn't sure what to answer. I thought that for being called Active Minds, we sure as hell weren't that active. So I came to the e-board at our next meeting, and they also wanted to brought up wanting to do something more proactive in our community. So I said, what about getting students to get up and share their story about mental health? It would help them by allowing them to talk about it, and it would help those in the audience know that they're not alone. We could call it Speak Out, Reach Out, or something less cheesy than that. Well, as you can see, we never came up with anything less cheesy. The program was successful. We hosted our first event in March of that year, and since then we've had 17 speakers, 18 including me, which is awesome. During my junior year, we were invited to present the program at the National Mental Health Conference in Maryland, hosted by the national chapter. We were awarded with the Innovative Programming Award for our work with Speak Out, Reach Out. I wanted to cry, I was so excited. As president of the group that year, I received many emails from students who wanted to share their story at our program. It was such an incredible feeling to know that I was part of something that actually made a difference for people. That is why if you're feeling like something is missing from your college experience, don't be afraid to try something new. At the very first org fair I attended, I wouldn't have thought much about joining Active Minds, but it ended up giving me some of the greatest experiences at Carthage, as well as the feel-good moments of making a real difference. We have so many organizations at this school, you are bound to find one that you click with. If the first one you try isn't it, don't stick around and let it bring you down like I did. Find something new. It's hard to find time to sit and feel sorry for yourself when you're very busy. My life is certainly not easy. I still struggle with my anxieties from separation, and I can't tell you the number of times I've wanted to break down the past few years as well. But the hard times were much less frequent, and I found ways to control them. I am a control freak, many of you probably know this, and I've always believed I can control or figure out any situation. But sometimes, that's not possible. You can't control what happens to you or what it makes you feel like, but you can control how you deal with it. I spent a long period of time feeling sorry for myself and fearing that things would never get better. These things are hard enough to deal with, but the feeling that something was wrong with me in particular, that normal people didn't feel these things, and that I must have been doing something wrong because everyone else loves college, made all of my normal coping mechanisms fail. So it meant I had to try harder if I wanted that life and if I wanted things to get better. This shouldn't have been new to me. I typically feel that I have to work a lot harder in my classes than some of the other students to achieve well, and I manage that. But sometimes that realization is tough for us to handle, especially if we already think we're strong. If you feel you need to seek help to get better, it doesn't mean that you've lost that strength. It means that you are even stronger than you thought. Being able to look at your situation and bravely make the choice to change it requires a lot more inner strength than letting things stay the same does. I can't tell you secrets to feeling better because it's different for everyone. I made an effort to journal, something I hadn't done since I was in middle school, but helped me through tough situations then, so it couldn't hurt now. I also spent, and still do attempt to spend, a lot more time to myself for self-reflection. I think that is something really key that is a hard promise to keep to yourself as homework begins to fill your agenda. But when you're unhappy with your outlook or your mindset, take some time for you. No, not sitting on Facebook. Try sitting outside by yourself. Obviously, this is not applicable in the lovely Kenosha January, but you get my point. I was under the impression for a long time that people could make me feel better, and people like my mom and my boyfriend certainly did. But there comes a point where when people aren't around, you have to learn to rely on yourself and what you are capable of doing to feel better. I am now a senior. I'm enrolled in a photography class and 3 English courses this semester, and I'm working on my senior thesis, something I could barely envision when I was a freshman. And while I can't say that I love the workload, that's okay. Knowing what it took for me to get to this point makes me pretty proud that I'm tackling this project. I'm currently photo editor for the current co-president of Sigma Tau Delta, our English honor fraternity, still an active member of Active Minds, and a soon-to-be teacher. For the first time in a long time, I am damn proud to be Megan Harrison. I'm not who I was in high school. Who really wants that anyway? In that first English class my freshman year, we watched episodes of Lost and did close readings of scenes. There was one episode where one character, John, showed another character, Charlie, a moth struggling to get out of his cocoon. John says, "I could take my knife and cut it and the moth would be free, but it would never survive." The struggle is nature's way of strengthening us. Well, my token response when anyone complains about things like getting flat tire or burning toast is it builds character. There's something to be said for the cliche that struggles strengthen us. Without that really hard first year, without the difficulties that continue to face me even when I thought I was on my feet, I would not be who I am today. There's another saying I often quote, "The man who has not suffered, what can he possibly know anyway?" I sort of analogize this to tests in school. If you've ever sought advice from me, you know that I'm an analogy queen. You might hate tests. You might often feel unprepared for those tests. You might think you can't pass a test and that your grade will never be the same. But no matter how hard it might be in that moment, without the test, how will you ever know what you're capable of? How will you ever realize how strong you are? Perhaps the most essential part of learning to make the best of this journey is to remind yourself not to compare it with someone else's experience. I know that's not easy, believe me. Not only is it hard to not feel abnormal when you see others having great fun on campus, but we are constantly prodded with images in the media depicting college as all fun. And college should be fun. And if it's not at least once, you are missing out. But college is not always fun, and it is not always as glamorous as it may seem. And it is that way for everyone, whether they ever admit it or not. And that's okay. One of my good friends from home told me a quote that I'm probably misquoting, but it was something like, "We compare our behind the scenes with everyone else's highlight reel." Basically, even if you think everyone is having a better time or life than you have to remember that you don't know their whole story. Everyone has one, and every story has ups and downs. Think about it. If the stories you read only had ups, it wouldn't be really worth reading, would they? The end of the novel or the last scene of the movie wouldn't have the same effect on us if we only watched the very beginning. The moments of low are what make us appreciate those moments of high when we are fortunate enough to get them. I know how hard it is to see an end in sight when you are struggling, but if you can find ways to cope with the challenging moments, be it in journaling, taking time for yourself, or seeking someone to talk to, the moments of joy will make it all worthwhile. My story was something I never thought was worth sharing, even with my closest friends. At the start of my college career, I saw myself as a girl who lost sight of the great person she once was, and who would never be the same again. Well, it turns out I was right. I'm not the same person. I'm better. I plunged headfirst into an organization that helped save me, where through feeling like I could and was making a difference, I began to grow proud of myself again. I've stayed strong in my classes, led organizations, and constantly looked for ways to appreciate my experience. I do continue to face low points now and then, but my story's not over. I have learned to embrace adjustment, and that has truly changed my perspective. The end.
Thank you, Megan. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask Megan at this time? Okay, if not, Megan's gonna probably hang around, so you can always come and talk to her if you have any questions you want to talk to her about. But other than that, thank you very much. Give her one more round of applause.